Okay, first of all, people have to learn principles. You know, one of the things I've come to conclusion is that you have to understand a foundation. You have to understand basics. So the basics of human health is quality of food, um, origins of food, and understanding what real food is. So when we look in nature and we look outside, if we pay attention to how it's unorganized and organized chaos. People will look at things and say, well, it doesn't make sense. But everything has a purpose. Everything works together symbiotically to give and take back and forth. And, you know, we don't look at things correctly. And that's one of the major problems. Like we forget about the basics. And if you look around at the basic stuff, then you start to realize that it doesn't need anything fancy. It always works. It's always reliable. And the chain can't be really broken. It's like perfection already. And so when I wrote my book, I basically wanted to capture and teach people these basic principles. And I put a whole variety of stuff in this book. There's from generating your own power with solar to why certain metals are important, why certain foods and principles are important, and then also looking at structures of stuff. And for example, I call these native beans. I grow a variety of beans that come from North America, and people would look at them and say, well, they look like beans you get anywhere, but they're not really. They're different. And they're different colors till they dry. And they have a different consistency. And for example, if you look at North American corn being almost all red, and then in the same patch, you'll get red, yellow, and brown. And then the next corn cob here will be more yellow with black kernels. And in this corn cob here, we'd have basically blue corn and yellow corn. So corn, native corn like this, now people have been educated in the stores to think that this is decorative corn and it's not edible. But all corn you're seeing in the stores, these yellow kernels or cob of corn, were basically specifically picked out, like from a kernel like this, and we'll just take all the yellow seed and we'll just grow that. And we'll eliminate all the other varieties. But you see, in our culture, this was the way corn grew. And if you're consuming this corn, you can't eat this corn after it's been dried like this, like right away. You would have to soak this in water for a few days and then cook it because the kernels are so hard. And this is why, for example, if you took this corn and ground it into a flour, you can make a flatbread from this that's really powerful for your body. And these kernels of corn will preserve and stay dry like this for 100 years easy.
Really?
No problem. So, see, in North American native culture, Aboriginal cultures, we knew how important quality of food was. So, for example, with corn, we would take this and take oak trees, and we would make charcoal from the oak, And then basically, and with the charcoal and the ash from oak trees, we would take these kernels here and mix them together and soak them in water for, 3 or 4 days. And then we would wash the corn out really, really clean. And then when we cooked that corn that we'd soaked in oak ash and washed it out, it was now no longer a carbohydrate. It was basically 90% protein. So even in the wintertime, if we didn't have any meat, we were not going to starve for lack of protein. But the knowledge of this didn't go to other countries because basically our knowledge has been suppressed. And so all over Africa, they're growing corn that originally came from here. And they're starving because they're not getting enough protein. And so people don't understand these basic things that we knew. That's why European culture, when they first came to North America, people who studied populations clearly said we were 500 years in medicinal and medicine quality ahead of anything that Europe even had discovered, and that they couldn't find any sickness in populations from young children to old people. We were all healthy. And they were blown away by that. And originally, when they first came here, they said, we just got some simple bows and sticks and clubs, and, with our armor, we'll come over here and destroy this population. But unfortunately, they didn't count on our ability to survival and our skills. And even you look at when Inuit culture in the Northwest Territories, and Inuit culture didn't really exist in the Northwest Territories. It was our Canadian government in 1952 that took Inuit populations all from the eastern coast of Labrador and Newfoundland and all along that ridge right to Hudson Bay, and forced them to live into Northwest Territories. And there's film documentation that say, what did they put us up here for? To freeze to death? You see, people don't understand the real history of Canada. And, Europeans were very fascinated how people could live in a cold climate for at least 8 months of the year in ice and snow, and bathe in ice cold water, live in skins, make igloos, and be healthy. And they were so healthy that they wore their teeth out. They didn't, no cavities. By the time they were 90 years old and died, basically their teeth were their gum lines. And they couldn't understand how that was. Well, if you look at cultures around the world, Inuit culture, for example, and North American Native culture, we fermented foods. We made pemmican, fermented meat. And in Arctic culture, they basically fermented fish in sealskins and birds in sealskins. And then they also fermented certain plants in sealskins and buried it in the ice. So people don't understand how, we look at things differently. And I get this all the time when people look at me and they say, well, you don't look Native. Well, I got 3 bloodlines in me, and unfortunately, I guess we got some DNA from other populations over time. And my father was a Beothuk Native Indian, and he told me when I was a little kid that he had blonde hair like me. And when you look at your father, and he has coal jet black hair, and I got the pictures to prove it. As I got older, my hair got streaked, and because I had my DNA tested, I got 3% Viking DNA. So someone had sex with the women in Newfoundland and left the kids behind. Fortunately for us, we got some DNA from Viking, which proves we actually do exist, even though the governments around the world say we're all dead. Now, getting back to my book, has a whole variety of stuff in here. And if it don't open your mind, you're blind in both eyes and you're deaf in both ears. That's all I can say.
Now, whenever I speak with you, Gary, you give like a lot of concentrated information, so I have to back up and ask you, some questions here.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned about the corn. It's so hard, but you mentioned about combining it with the charcoal from an oak tree,
Yeah, oak
and that
ash.
turns in. Yeah, can you go deep into that?
Well, I didn't discover this. Indigenous cultures discovered how to do this. I don't know how long ago, probably 1,000 years ago or something. They figured it out because in the wintertime, if they had a lack of food, they needed protein.
Yeah.
And not every day when you go out into the bush hunting, you get an animal.
Right.
And so someone figured it out that, if he soaked the corn in the ash of wood, that basically it chemically changed the molecular structure of the corn to get rid of most of the carbohydrates and keep the protein. And this corn, when it's fresh, it's easy to cook and steam, and you can eat it like regular corn. But once it's dried, it holds its ability to preserve. And for example, in the United States, in the state of California, it was discovered that they were spraying some type of a herbicide specifically all along there because the native population in America was starting to thrive again. And they realized that they would spray this corn with a chemical compound and it would cause men to be infertile and women too. And it was discovered that, and basically there was such an uproar in the United States that they stopped doing it. But I really don't think they have, because when you look at our corn, it really makes you think about erectile function.
Okay.
Okay? It doesn't look like regular corn.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see it growing outside in the kernels, honestly, it just grows like a sexual organ.
Mm-hmm.
So,
is there a difference between the different colors? I mean, you have red.
Not necessarily. God had a plan. God has a plan that there would be a variety of kernels and colors.
Does one have more nutritional value than the other?
I don't think so.
No. Okay.
I think it's all equally based. It's variety, right?
Mm.
It's variety. That's the way it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Same thing with the beans. They're not all the same color.
Yeah, tell us about the beans.
Well, I'd say about 35 years ago, when I wasn't feeling so good and I got sick the first time, I was 38, really, really sick for a couple of years. And after that, I discovered certain things and I healed myself. And basically, I started doing research because my grandmother started teaching me some plant medicine and as a kid, and I really, really did not, think about it too much back then, but for some reason it got my curiosity that how she knew how to help someone, that you would come and see her by walking into the bush, picking certain plants and stuff and showing them to make tea from certain things, and it was helping them. And there was always a regular flow of people coming to visit her in Northern Ontario. And when she spent time at my mother's house with us as kids, and we went picking blueberries or picking stuff in the forest, she would go and get me to pick stuff. And it was basic understanding that she started teaching me. And my grandmother always carried a Bible, even though the Catholic Church had persecuted our family like horrendously. And I can't specifically say that enough times. She said the book is good, the people are bad. And her knowledge of the Bible was incredible. And she also understood Aboriginal culture, which she was raised in, and things on the earth. And basically, she pointed how the biblical text talked about all these kind of things. And when I got sick, I started rereading the Bible from cover to cover, which I had done when I was a little kid. And because my mother told me one day when I was bored, she said, read the Bible, you'll learn something. And basically, I was the oldest in the family. I listened to my parents. They never had any trouble from me. And I basically read the book from cover to cover. And I had lots of questions as a kid that I couldn't be answered, because as a child, you understand one way, but as an adult, you understand in other contexts.
That's true, yeah.
And as you get older, you start to realize things that, you don't realize. And me growing up and going to school and stuff like that, my mind has been always a curious mind, and I have to know things. I was a born natural scientist. I can't help that. It's a fact. I'll examine things, break things apart. I want to know why and how it works and what for. And I was always like that.
Wow.
When I started working in the automotive industry, everybody knew me as when I was working as an automotive machinist, learning that trade. I was always asking why. And anytime some senior person came along and say, how's Y doing today? Because I had 2 million questions. Why do you want me to do it that way? And, when I would figure out a way that was better, I had to argue my viewpoint and sometimes a guy with 30 years experience, and I was just learning, I proved he was wrong. I had a faster way of doing it because my mind examines things. I break it apart. I want to know the why, the how. And I can't help that. That's just the way my outlet has always been.
Right.
And so when I was very sick and learning how to heal my body using what God put on the earth for us already, I wanted to know how and why. And I examined things. And sometimes, you run into people. Like one time I was on a reserve in Manitoulin Island, and, the guy talking to me with darker brown skin, but, probably didn't know all of his own history. Anyway, I picked up a plant off the ground, which I knew about, and he basically said, I asked him a question, and he said, all you white people always want to know how it works. And what he didn't know was plantain didn't come from North America. It came from Europe. And when it originally came into North America, we called it the pale man's footprint, because the seeds of plantain are so tiny, and it was a growing plant in Europe. They grew it in gardens for food because it's a food and a medicine as well. So in people's sandals, the little seeds would be stuck. And every place they walked and the seeds fell out, the plant grew. So that's why it's called the pale man's footprint. And, when you're on a boat for 2.5, 3 months, eating salt fish and hardly drinking any water, other than if it rained, you got some water, your body health goes down because you're, dehydrated and so like that. So when you get off the boat, you're sick and you're pale because you don't have the life force. And so that's why it was called a pale man's footprint, because every place he walked, that little seed fell out. And plantain grows easy, grows everywhere. And, I've seen so many people on the internet, indigenous people, talking about different plants, how they are, it's part of their culture and stuff like that. And they don't realize that those plants did not exist in North America. They were brought here from other cultures. And people in native communities that understood the benefits of them started using them because, we can understand if you show me something that's better than what I'm doing, I'm going to accept it.
Yeah.
Where most other cultures around the world just think they're the only one that's right, and don't want to. I look at life like this: when a wind blows on a tree, the branches that are dead break off. The ones that are alive bend and flow with the wind because they're alive and functioning. And human beings that accept things and understand and prove things and look at it really with both eyes and both ears open and examine its benefits, then we get to see stuff, right?
So,
But if,
so the branch that's alive represents understanding, and with understanding, you're able to live longer.
of course, no person is on an island. You know, every human being was put some aspect of the creator inside of them. You don't believe in a God, that's your problem. Okay? But nothing happened over time. Over time, we've changed maybe genetically a little bit because of foods and stuff like that. But human beings, along with spirit beings, are the only things that have language. Animals don't have language. They're programmed, they make sounds and they communicate differently, but they don't have language. And they do not have reasoning at all, no matter how somebody tries to explain it with experiments and everything else. They just don't. It's like I made my mother laugh one day so hard she fell off her chair while she's watching me trying to catch a chicken. And, the chicken thought it was going to get away with me, but eventually I trapped it. Because you see, I have the ability to think. I mean, that chicken could fly. Like, my chickens at my farm, if you chase them, they will fly because I don't cut their wings. And people will find that kind of strange that a rooster that's weighing 30 pounds can fly 40 feet up into a tree. Yes, it can.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I've seen chickens flying at 15 feet down my 500-foot driveway while a dog was chasing them all.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. They all flew, right? And they all went underneath the car parked in the yard because the dog couldn't get underneath there.
Wow.
Right? See, so everything in nature has ability, but they still can't reason.
Yeah.
See, like me trying to catch that hen that could fly it could fly like it was crazy. And I couldn't catch it. But I figured out if I put a wire cage and some food in there, eventually I blocked one in, and the chicken didn't know I blocked one in because I had wire there so it could see, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it couldn't see that there was a wire. Mm-hmm. And so when it went in one side, I stepped on the end of the cage and caught the chicken, right?
Smart.
Right? Because I can figure out things and reason, right, where animals can't, right? So anyway, it's the same thing. I look at everything. I look at things. I don't just, make a random assumption. That's why sometimes people of other races or whatever that name, even though they've been born in North America or in Canada, and I'll ask somebody, well, what's your background? And they look at me kind of strange as if, I'm racist or prejudiced. No, I just want to know what your background is. What's your cultural background? Where did you come from? What's your beliefs? What do you do? Do you like living here? I'm always curious. I like to know. And going to school, because my name was spelt differently, and I did speak French. I lost most of it, but it was my first language when I was a kid growing up. And I do understand a little bit of my Algonquin language, a small amount. And I've always planned that I should study it more, because certain terminologies in the Algonquin language, like some languages around the world, when you say the name of a plant, it's an actual description and terminology of its use and what it has going on for it. So the thing I like to talk about, for example, and explain that in, is if you hear the word dandelion in English doesn't tell you really anything about the plant. But if you go to the word dandelion in French, well, it's called pissenlit. So that's what they call it. So it says pee in the bed, basically. So they've explained it as a diuretic it is. So when you consume dandelions, it actually is a diuretic.
Okay.
And it makes your kidneys open up and makes you go to the bathroom and urinate a lot.
So it's good for you.
So it's good for you, right? So, and then people don't really realize that all dandelions came originally from China. And most of them probably got into North America when Chinese immigrants came here to build the railroads across North America in the United States and in Canada. Basically, that's how they brought some of those seeds and and some of the dried food with them, and they planted it and basically to have it because that was part of their culture. And so it's the same thing like with potatoes that basically went to Europe. Originally, they didn't want to eat it because they said it was an ugly fruit. Same thing with Jerusalem artichoke. They didn't want to eat them because it was an ugly fruit. Um, so, but look at how Irish culture, basically, potatoes grew so well there that the culture in Ireland really took off to a high level, and the population grew in 10 years from 1 million to 8 million people. And England and certain parts of Europe got worried because they basically decimated Ireland, and Irish people are kind of very revengeful. Yeah, they hold a grudge. Believe me, they do. And so they forced the landowners, basically the people with the power, basically convinced them to grow more wheat and limit their ability to grow potatoes. And basically, that's what caused the potato famine in Ireland. And they shipped all the food out and basically left the peasants with nothing. And basically, 8 million people starved to death.
Wow.
And, people don't look at history, don't look at things. And I'm very concerned about what's happening all over North America, where people are being limited to what they can do on their land. And they're being told, well, which is a fact, in Canada, basically, you don't own your land. It's supposedly the king